Thousands of victims of the contaminated blood scandal will receive £100,000 each in compensation from the government. The announcement follows a recommendation made last month by the chair of the public inquiry into what's being described as the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS. It led to the deaths of at least 2,400 people after they were infected with lethal viruses in the 1970s and 80s. Partners of those who died will qualify for payment, but campaigners say the majority of those affected have been ignored. Well, Dame Diana Johnson is the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on haemophilia and contaminated blood, and she shared her thoughts with us this morning.
Well, I'm very pleased that the government have announced formally that interim payments will be made for those people who are currently receiving financial support under the support schemes. However, there are many people who will not receive any of the interim payments, particularly parents or children of those who received contaminated blood. So it's a welcome first step. I also ought to say that I know you just referred to the fact that Sir Brian Langstaff made a recommendation just last month, but actually Sir Robert Francis made this recommendation for interim payments in March of this year. So the government have had this recommendation sitting there for quite some time, and I am pleased they've made it now, but it has taken much longer than I think it should have done. They should have done this straight away back in March.
Dame Diana Johnson there. Well, I'm joined now by Jason Evans, founder of Factor 8, a campaign for the victims of the infected blood scandal and their families. His father, Jonathan, died in October 1993 after being infected with both hepatitis C and HIV. Jason, thank you very much for joining us. We've spoken about your campaign and what happened to your dad before. Perhaps you could tell our viewers today a little bit more about him and the impact that this has had on your family over the years.
Sure. Well, my father was born with the blood clotting disorder, Hemophilia. And in the 1970s and 1980s, like virtually all people receiving Hemophilia treatment at that time, he began to be given these new commercial pharmaceutical drugs, Factor 8 concentrate blood products. And due to the dangerous manufacturing processes involved in making those products, he and thousands of others was infected with hepatitis C and HIV. My father was infected with both viruses, and he died as a result of his infections when I was 4 years old in 1993.
So a huge impact on your family, on you, losing your dad so young.
Yes. I mean, I had to grow up without a father, which unfortunately in this in our community is all too common. But actually, when I listen to some of the stories, I may be counted as one of the lucky ones in a way, because there are people who lost both of their parents, where their father, due to the hereditary nature of haemophilia, unwittingly infected their mother, and both their parents died. And awfully, those families are included in the majority that won't be receiving any interim compensation.
And you've been campaigning for families to receive compensation for a long time now. It's been a long time coming. How do you feel about today's announcement, given that you and other groups, other interested parties are saying that this doesn't cover everyone who should be getting something?
Well, I think I echo the words of Dame Diana Johnson. It is a step forward. It was in January 2020, I believe, when I and others attended a meeting at the Cabinet Office with the then Paymaster General Oliver Dowden. Nadine Dorris was there, and I put forward the proposal then to begin work on this framework for compensation, and others in the meeting supported that proposal. Eventually, after a year or so of campaigning, the government did concede to such an exercise. I noticed the press release the government have put out and the statements today try to indicate the government somehow proactively set up this compensation study. They didn't. It very much came from campaigning efforts of victims and families. So it's a step forward. We've got somewhere, but the facts are these, if we look at those infected with HIV, for example, we know there were originally about 1,240 plus people infected with HIV. We know that as of September last year, there were 229 victims still alive, so the vast majority have died. And we know as of yesterday, through fresh Freedom of Information data, that there are currently 228 bereaved partners registered with the existing scheme of those infected with HIV. So that leaves us with 457 of the 1,240 plus that will receive this payment, which means 63%, most of the victims' families, will not receive the payment. So it's a step forward, but it's caused a lot of upset and distress. In particular, you know, I've had emails from elderly parents whose children died, often multiple children, age 8, 9, 10 years old, infected with HIV, and they've said to me, you know, we're in our 70s, our 80s, and now that we know we're not going to get this interim payment, we feel like the death of our son we'll never see recognition for that. And I really sympathise with those families in particular who don't have time to wait, unfortunately.
I have no doubt that your campaigning will continue, Jason. Thank you very much for talking to us today.